Imagine you're executing like massive trades on the JSE through a dark pool.
Right.
You put your money in, you get your shares out, but you have, absolutely zero visibility into the fact that the clearinghouse is quietly shaving percentages off every single transaction in the dark.
Yeah, they're just skimming right off the top.
Exactly. You assume you're paying for the underlying asset, but in reality, you're just funding their arbitrage. And if you are managing a supply chain in South Africa right now and relying heavily on traditional freight brokers, well, you are operating in that exact same dark pool.
You really are. And that lack of visibility is, it's really the core premise of the research we are tearing into today.
Yeah.
So Greystride recently published this piece titled, Why Broker-Based Transport Models Increase Your Costs. And I mean, it completely dismantles the default operating procedure for most logistics professionals in this country.
It really takes a sledgehammer to it.
It does, because the industry treats the freight broker as like an inevitable utility, just a necessary middleman to handle the absolute chaos of the transport market.
Right.
But the data suggests that this structural layer is actually actively eroding margins. It's systematically stripping away operational control from the people who actually own the freight.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you are looking at your transport spend right now, you probably just see a neat consolidated line item on a spreadsheet.
Exactly, just one number.
You pay the invoice, the load moves from Joburg to Cape Town, and you move on to the next fire. But Greystride points out that the real cost isn't just that invoiced rate.
No, not at all.
The real danger is the hidden spread. So let's break down the actual financial mechanics of what happens when that broker actually takes your load.
Yeah, so the hidden spread is literally the financial foundation of the entire traditional brokerage model.
Okay.
When you hand a load to a broker, you negotiate a rate that you believe reflects the current market value of moving that freight.
Right. Sure. Like, I think I'm paying a fair price.
Right. Let's say you agree on a premium rate because you really need reliability for this shipment. Well, the broker then turns around to the open market, often just using load boards or, their own database of fragmented subcontractors.
Right, dialing for diesels, basically.
Exactly. And they find a fleet owner willing to take that load for significantly less. And the broker just pockets the difference?
So it's like buying a house through a middleman, where neither the buyer nor the seller knows that the agent's taking a secret 20% cut.
That is a perfect way to put it.
I mean, you think you're paying for a premium service, but the guy doing the actual heavy lifting is just scraping by. So what does this all mean for the actual day-to-day service?
Well, what's fascinating here is the psychological and operational disconnect this creates.
Okay.
From your perspective as the load provider, transport feels really expensive.
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive line item.
Right, but from the transporter's perspective, the rate is entirely unsustainable. You have a massive transaction where the two most critical parties are financially blind to one another.
Wow.
You assume the transporter is well compensated and therefore, incentivized to provide excellent service, but the transporter assumes you are a low-paying client who doesn't value their equipment at all.
But wait, I have to play the skeptic here for a second.
Why?
If the fleet owner is accepting the load, they must be making some profit, right?
What?
Because nobody runs a truck at a deliberate loss. Why would they take the job if the broker's spread squeezes them that hard?
You have to look at the structural desperation of a fragmented market.
Desperation.
Yeah. Very often that fleet owner is taking the load, not because it's actually profitable, but because they are just desperate for a backhaul.
Oh, right.
They've driven from Durban to Gauteng. They really don't want to run empty all the way back down the N3, so they just take whatever rate the broker dictates to cover their diesel and tolls.
So they aren't making a profit at all.
No, they are just mitigating a loss.
And, man, when a transport operator is running purely to mitigate losses day in and day out, the physical reality of that squeezed margin is going to manifest on the road.
Absolutely.
You can't magically invent cash flow. If the broker took 20% off the top, that 20% has to come from somewhere in the physical world.
It comes out of the maintenance cycle and it comes out of driver welfare.
Yikes.
Yeah, that missing margin is literally the difference between replacing brake pads proactively versus pushing them for another 10,000 kilometers.
Which is terrifying on South African roads.
It really is. It's the difference between investing in telematics and predictive maintenance software versus just running blind until a universal jump fails.
Mm-hmm.
The broker's hidden margin is directly subsidized by the physical degradation of the trucks moving your valuable cargo.
Which means you are inadvertently funding a system that incentivizes cutting corners. You think you are buying stability, but you are buying a compromised asset. And that physically compromised asset is what exposes the next massive flaw that Greystride highlights, which is the operational blind spots.
Oh, this is where it really falls apart.
Right, because when that under-maintained truck eventually breaks down, the financial opacity immediately turns into just complete operational chaos.
Because broker models, by their very design, have to restrict your visibility.
Yeah, to protect their cut.
Precisely. If the broker introduces you directly to the fleet owner, you might realize, hey, I don't need this broker.
Right.
So they keep the parties completely separated. You often do not know the actual name of the trucking company, the registration of the horse and trailer, or even the compliance standing of the operator until the very last minute.
But wait, surely if I'm just moving standard palletized goods, the identity of the driver shouldn't be my primary concern.
You'd think so, but
I mean, if the freight gets from point A to point B, why do I need to know the granular details of the subcontractor? Isn't the whole point of outsourcing to avoid caring about those details?
okay, so outsourcing a task is fine, but outsourcing accountability is incredibly dangerous, especially in the South African context.
Okay, fair point.
We aren't operating in a vacuum here. We are dealing with severe port congestion at Durban and Richards Bay. We've got unpredictable weather closures on the escarpment.
Cross-border delays at Bight Bridge.
Exactly. And high instances of cargo theft. In that environment, exceptions are the rule. Things will go wrong.
Yeah, it's not an if, it's a when.
Right. And when they do, your ability to recover depends entirely on how quickly you can communicate with the actual person solving the problem.
So let's look at a practical scenario. Let's say I've got a load of temperature-sensitive FMCG goods, right? And it's stuck on the side of the N3 at 2.8 a.m. because of a mechanical failure. Now, if I used a direct fleet, I just call the control room, they radio the driver, and we implement a contingency plan. What happens in the broker model?
Well, you call the broker.
Right.
But it's 2.0 a.m., so the broker might not even answer.
Oh, great.
And when they finally do, they don't know what's wrong with the truck because it's not their truck.
So they have to make another call.
Exactly. They have to call the fleet owner.
Yeah.
Then the fleet owner has to wake up and try to get hold of the driver, who, by the way, might be out of cellular range.
Oh, man.
You are playing a high-stakes, slow-motion game of telephone through a middleman whose primary interest is protecting their margin, not your freight.
And while that slow-motion game of telephone is playing out, the clock is just ticking on my delivery window.
Which brings us to the real cost of this operational blind spot. In high-stakes logistics, delays are not just, minor inconveniences.
No, they're incredibly expensive.
Right. If that FMCG shipment misses its strict receiving slot at a major retailer's distribution center, it doesn't just get unloaded late, it gets entirely rejected.
Yeah, they just turn the truck around.
You face severe demurrage charges, the stock gets returned, your shelf space sits empty, and you face massive financial penalties from the retailer.
Wow.
So that broker's lack of transparency just cost you real hard revenue.
And that completely shatters the illusion that brokers save you money.
Completely.
I mean, you might have saved a few $100 on the initial booking rate, but you sacrificed the operational control required to prevent a massive financial loss on the back end.
Exactly.
It really forces us to ask a deeper question about the architecture of this whole relationship. Like, why hasn't the traditional broker model evolved to prevent this? Why does it inherently fail to serve the long-term strategic needs of the load provider?
It boils down to a fundamental misalignment of incentives. You have to analyze what actually drives the behavior of the two parties. For you, the logistics professional, the goal is a supply chain that operates with boring, predictable consistency.
Boring is good in logistics.
Boring is great. You want strict cost control, high compliance, and long-term reliability. You want a partner who actually understands your specific operational quirks.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the broker's business model isn't built on boring predictability at all.
No, it's not.
According to Greystride, a broker's survival depends on volume and transactional velocity. Like, their core competency isn't running trucks.
Right.
Their core competency is just matching an available load to an available asset as quickly as possible, taking the spread and moving to the next line on the load board.
And that need for speed and volume completely hijacks the decision-making process.
How so?
Well, when the broker is placing your freight, they're not asking, hey, which fleet in our network has the best compliance record for this specific type of hazardous chemical?
Right, they don't care about that.
They are asking, Who is empty right now within a 20-kilometer radius? Who will accept a rate low enough for me to clear my required margin?
Wow. So it's just the availability trap.
Exactly.
You are getting whoever happens to be desperate and nearby, rather than who is actually qualified and strategically aligned with your business. And that means the relationship just remains entirely transactional.
Yes.
Every single load is treated as an isolated zero-sum game.
And that prevents you from ever building operational momentum.
Operational momentum, I like that term.
Yeah, I mean, if you use a consistent, dedicated transport partner, they learn your business.
Right.
The drivers learn the layout of your loading bays. They understand your strict site safety inductions. They know exactly how your receiving clerks operate. That familiarity breeds efficiency.
Absolutely.
But in the broker model, you might get a completely different driver from a different subcontractor every single day. You are basically starting from zero every morning.
And that reset is exhausting.
It is.
It means my warehouse staff are constantly dealing with unfamiliar trucks, dealing with drivers who don't have the right PPE or who, just don't understand the load securement requirements for my specific product. The friction just constantly compounds.
And Greystride maps out this compounding effect quite clearly in the report.
What do they say?
Well, over a financial year, this transactional approach snowballs into a massive drag on your supply chain.
Makes sense.
It drives up your effective transport costs because you are constantly paying for the inefficiencies of unfamiliarity.
Right. Time is money.
It increases your exposure to service risk because you have absolutely no baseline of performance data on the underlying fleets. And ultimately, it just paralyzes your ability to scale.
Because you cannot build a long-term strategic growth plan on a foundation of reactive, unpredictable variables.
Exactly. You just can't.
I mean, if my team is spending 40% of their day tracking down broker loads, fighting over demurrage, and dealing with rejected deliveries, they aren't optimizing our network.
No, they're firefighting.
Exactly. They aren't negotiating better volume tiers. We've handed the steering wheel of our supply chain over to an entity whose only incentive is their own daily turnover.
Which is an untenable position for any modern logistics operation.
Totally. So if the broker model is this reactive trap characterized by hidden margins, compromised safety, and misaligned incentives, what is the actual way out? Because the freight still have to move, right?
Yes, the demand doesn't stop just because the procurement model is flawed.
Right. This is where Greystride introduces the alternative, the model that leading supply chain directors are quietly pivoting toward to regain control.
Yes, the direct structured transport model.
Okay, now, on paper, bypassing the broker sounds great.
Sure.
But if I'm a supply chain director, my immediate thought is, I don't have the bandwidth to build my own fleet.
Of course not.
And I certainly don't have the administrative capacity to vet, onboard, and manage 50 independent transport subcontractors.
Yeah.
So how does this direct model actually function without burying my team in paperwork?
Well, it requires a massive paradigm shift. You have to move from treating transport as a spot market purchase to treating it as an integrated capability.
Okay, integrated capability.
A direct, structured model doesn't mean you just fire your brokers and start cold calling random trucking companies.
Thank goodness.
Right. It means you build a highly vetted, closed network of transport partners based on open book transparency.
Open book.
Yeah. You sit down with a capable fleet owner and you strip away the opacity.
So instead of a black box invoice where I don't know who makes what, we're actually looking at the real costs together.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You establish a clear, structured rate card.
Okay.
You agree on a base rate that covers the fixed costs of the vehicle. So that's insurance, financing, maintenance, driver salaries.
Right.
You agree on a fair, transparent profit margin for the transporter. And then you link the variable costs, like diesel, directly to the DMRE monthly price fluctuations.
Oh, wow. So there are zero hidden layers.
Zero. Both parties know exactly what is being paid and exactly where every cent of that money is going.
I mean, that fundamentally changes the dynamic.
Completely.
If I guarantee the transporter a fair margin and consistent volume, their desperation just vanishes.
Exactly.
They no longer have to push their drivers for 14 hours straight just to break even. They have the financial breathing room to properly maintain the vehicles carrying my freight.
And that financial breathing room is exactly what buys you operational reliability.
Right.
When the transporter knows they have a profitable, long-term relationship with you, they become highly incentivized to protect that relationship.
Makes sense.
They invest in better telematics, they dedicate specific, well-trained drivers to your routes, and they proactively communicate issues before they become crises. The incentives are finally aligned. Both of you want a smooth, predictable, incident-free operation.
But how do you enforce that predictability?
Ah,
Because, trust is great, but in logistics, data is definitely better.
always.
If we remove the broker who is holding the transporter accountable for their actual performance,
You do. Through clearly defined service level agreements or SLAs.
okay,
Because you have a direct relationship, you can implement rigorous performance tracking. You track on-time delivery metrics, turnaround times at the loading bays, safety compliance, invoice accuracy.
which you couldn't do before.
Exactly. In the broker model, you couldn't track the underlying fleet because the broker hid their identity.
Right.
But in a structured direct model, you have full visibility into the data. You review the performance with the transporter monthly. If they are hitting the KPIs, you reward them with more volume.
And if they aren't?
If they are falling short, you have a transparent mechanism to address it.
It's basically the difference between calling a random, unknown cab every single morning and hoping they drive safely versus building your own dedicated fleet ecosystem.
That is a brilliant analogy.
It transforms a transport from a chaotic daily auction into a strategic, managed ecosystem.
Yeah.
You are no longer reacting to whoever happens to be available. You are proactively deploying assets that you know and trust. And Greystride frames this shift brilliantly. They say it is moving from buying transport as a transaction to building transport as a capability.
Capability is the defining word there.
Yeah.
When transport is a capability, it becomes a competitive advantage. Think about the flexibility it gives you in a volatile market like South Africa.
Oh, it's huge.
If there is a sudden spike in demand or a massive disruption at the port, you aren't fighting 50 other companies for spot market trucks on a broker's load board at extortionate rates.
Right, you're insulated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have a dedicated network of partners who prioritize your freight because you have prioritized their financial stability.
And the cost efficiency of that predictability is massive.
Huge.
I mean, while the direct model obviously requires upfront work to establish, the vetting, the negotiations, integrating the systems, the long-term ROI easily dwarfs the perceived convenience of the broker.
Without a doubt.
You eliminate the hidden 15 to 20% spread. You drastically reduce demurrage and penalties caused by operational blind spots, and you free up your internal team from the endless administrative friction of managing transactional failures.
It moves your entire supply chain from a state of anxious reactivity to a state of planned, calm execution.
Calm execution, I love that.
Yeah, you shift from suffering hidden, uncontrollable costs to managing highly visible, highly controlled spend. It is basically a maturation of the procurement strategy.
So to synthesize everything we've pulled from the Greystride research today,
Let's do it.
the traditional freight broker model, while seemingly convenient on the surface, is a structural trap.
Yes.
It relies on a hidden financial spread that secretly inflates your logistics costs while simultaneously starving the actual transport operators of the capital they need to maintain safe, reliable fleets.
And that financial opacity breeds severe operational blind spots, separating you from the people actually handling your goods. This transparency deficit leaves you entirely exposed to massive downstream risks like rejected deliveries, ruined relationships with retailers, and compounded delays because you are communicating through a middleman whose primary incentive is fast turnover, not the long-term integrity of your supply chain.
And the misalignment of incentives forces a transactional, short-term approach that prevents you from ever achieving true operational momentum.
Exactly.
So the solution, as adopted by leading logistics operators, is to abandon the dark pool. You transition to a direct, structured transport model.
Yes.
You build transparent, open-book relationships with vetted fleets, align your incentives through clear rate structures and SLAs, and turn your transport network into a strategic capability rather than just a daily procurement headache.
And that forces a very hard look at the spreadsheets you are managing right now.
It really does.
Greystride poses a brilliant question that every supply chain director needs to answer. If you suddenly had full visibility into every cent spent on transport, perfectly aligned incentives with the fleets moving your goods, and structured data control over your network, how much more efficient could your operation actually become?
It is a question that challenges the status quo of the entire industry.
Absolutely.
But before we close out this deep dive, I want to pose one final thought for you to carry into your next operations meeting.
Okay, what is it?
Well, we've talked about the manual effort of building a direct network to bypass the broker.
Yeah.
But look at the trajectory of supply chain technology right now.
Oh, it's moving fast.
We are seeing the rise of incredibly sophisticated AI-driven digital control towers and automated load matching algorithms that instantly verify a fleet's insurance, compliance, and availability.
The technological barrier to direct connection is dissolving rapidly.
Yes, exactly. If software can instantly provide that operational transparency, match the load, and process the open book payment without taking a 20% hidden spread,
Right.
does the traditional human freight broker actually have a future in the South African logistics landscape?
That is a great question.
Or is the entire concept of a middleman about to be rendered completely obsolete by transparent algorithmic networks?
Wow.
It's a fundamental shift. And if you are still relying on a broker's black box, you might be funding a model that the rest of the industry is actively leaving behind. Keep digging into those invoices, demand visibility, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.